The rusted car door slammed shut with a finality that made Sarah's heart sink deeper into her chest. She stood in the parking lot of the Greyhound station, clutching her 6-month-old daughter Emma against her shoulder, watching the tail of Marcus's sedan disappear into the Montana twilight. The 23-year-old woman had exactly $47 in her wallet, a diaper bag with 2 clean diapers left, and nowhere to go. "I can't do this anymore, Sarah," his words echoed in her mind like a cruel mantra. "I never wanted to be a father. I'm done pretending." The October wind cut through her thin jacket, and Emma began to fuss, sensing her mother's distress. Sarah bounced her gently, fighting back tears that threatened to freeze on her cheeks. She'd believed Marcus when he said they'd figure it out together after Emma was born. She'd believed him when he said he loved them both. Now she understood that love to him was conditional on convenience, on ease, on a life without responsibility. The bus station was nearly empty, except for an elderly janitor mopping the floors and a woman behind the ticket counter who kept glancing at the clock. Sarah approached the counter with trembling hands. "Where's the last bus headed tonight?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The woman looked up from her paperwork, her expression softening when she saw Emma. "Well, honey, we've got one more bus heading to Copper Ridge at 9:30. That's about 30 miles north. After that, nothing until morning." Sarah checked her phone. 9:15 p.m. She had enough money for the ticket, but then what? She didn't know a soul in Copper Ridge, didn't even know if there was a motel or shelter. But staying here in Billings, in the city where Marcus had just abandoned them, felt impossible. "One ticket to Copper Ridge, please," she said, sliding her last $20 bill across the counter. The bus was nearly empty. Just Sarah, Emma, and 3 other passengers who looked as worn down by life as she felt. As the bus pulled away from the station, Sarah pressed her face against the cold window and watched the lights of Billings fade behind them. Emma had finally fallen asleep in her arms. Her tiny fist curled around Sarah's finger. The landscape outside grew darker and more desolate with each mile. Rolling hills stretched endlessly under a star-filled sky, occasionally broken by the distant lights of a ranch house. Sarah closed her eyes and tried to pray, though she wasn't sure anyone was listening anymore. She'd prayed when her parents died in the car accident 2 years ago. She'd prayed when she found out she was pregnant and scared. She'd prayed that Marcus would be the man she needed him to be. None of those prayers had been answered the way she'd hoped. The bus shuddered to a stop, and the driver called out, "Copper Ridge, end of the line." Sarah gathered her meager belongings and stepped off the bus into the cold mountain air. The station was nothing more than a small building with a bench outside, and it was completely dark except for a single streetlight. As the bus pulled away, its taillights disappearing around a bend, Sarah realized she was completely alone with her baby, in a town she'd never heard of. With no plan and no hope, she sat on the bench and held Emma close, wondering how she'd gotten to this point and what she was going to do next. The bench was hard and cold beneath Sarah, and Emma had begun crying a steady, heartbreaking wail that echoed off the empty buildings of Copper Ridge's main street. Sarah rocked her daughter gently, but she had no bottle to offer, no warm place to take her. The streetlight cast long shadows, and every sound seemed amplified in the silence. "It's okay, baby girl," Sarah whispered, though her own voice was shaking. "Mommy's going to figure this out." She pulled out her phone to search for nearby shelters or motels, but her heart sank when she saw the no-service message. The remote mountain town apparently had poor cell coverage. Emma's cries grew louder, and Sarah felt panic rising in her throat. That's when she heard the sound of boots on gravel. "Ma'am, you all right over there?" Sarah looked up to see a tall figure approaching from across the street. In the dim light, she could make out a cowboy hat and the silhouette of broad shoulders. Every instinct told her to be wary. She was alone with a baby in a strange town, and this could be anyone. But something in the man's voice was gentle, concerned rather than threatening. We're fine," she said, though Emma's continued crying suggested otherwise. The man stopped a respectful distance away, removing his hat to reveal dark hair and kind eyes. He looked to be in his early 30s, with the weathered face of someone who spent his days outdoors. "Name's Jake Morrison," he said. "I was closing up the hardware store across the street when I heard the baby crying. This isn't exactly a place where folks get dropped off in the middle of the night." Sarah studied his face, trying to read his intentions. He seemed genuinely concerned, not predatory. "I'm Sarah, and this is Emma. We just needed to get out of Billings." Jake nodded slowly, as if he understood there was more to the story. "Well, Sarah, I don't know your situation, but sitting out here in the cold isn't going to help either of you. The baby sounds hungry, and you both look like you could use some warmth. I don't have money for a hotel, Sarah admitted, her cheeks burning with embarrassment. I just, ... I don't know what I was thinking coming here. Jake was quiet for a moment, and Sarah could almost see him weighing his options. Finally, he spoke. My grandmother runs a boarding house about 2 miles up the road. She's got a kind heart and doesn't turn away folks in need. I could give you both a ride up there, see if she's got a room for the night. Sarah's first instinct was to refuse. She'd been burned by trusting too easily before. But as she looked at Emma's red, tear-stained face, she realized she didn't have the luxury of pride anymore. Her daughter needed warmth, food, and safety. Why would you help us? She asked. You don't even know us. Jake replaced his hat and shrugged. My grandmother always taught me that, when someone's in trouble, you help if you can. Simple as that. Besides, he added with a small smile, I've got a truck with a working heater. And that little one sounds like she's about to wake up half the county. Sarah felt tears welling up in her eyes, not from despair this time, but from relief. Thank you. I don't know how to repay you. No need to repay anything, Jake said, walking toward a pickup truck parked nearby. Sometimes people just need a hand up, not a hand out. He opened the passenger door for her, and Sarah noticed that despite his rugged appearance, he was a gentleman. She climbed in with Emma, who immediately began to quiet down in the warm cab. As Jake started the engine and pulled onto the empty road, Sarah felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Hope. Maybe, just maybe, she'd found a place where she and Emma could catch their breath and figure out their next move. Tell me about your grandmother, Sarah said, as they drove through the darkness. Jake smiled. Rose Morrison is 82 years old and tougher than most men half her age. She's been running that boarding house for 30 years, and she's never turned away someone who genuinely needed help. The boarding house appeared like a beacon in the darkness, its warm windows glowing yellow against the night sky. It was a large 2-story farmhouse with a wraparound porch and flower boxes that, even in October, held the remnants of what must have been a beautiful garden. As Jake's truck pulled into the circular driveway, Sarah could see through the windows into a cozy living room where a fire crackled in the fireplace. Grandma Rose stays up late, Jake explained as he turned off the engine. She says sleep is overrated when there's so much living to do. Sarah gathered Emma, who had fallen asleep during the ride, and followed Jake up the wooden steps. He knocked gently on the door, and within moments, it swung open to reveal a petite woman with silver hair pulled back in a neat bun and eyes that sparkled with intelligence and warmth. Jake Morrison, what are you doing bringing visitors at this hour? Rose asked, but her tone was more amused than annoyed. Her gaze immediately went to Sarah and the baby in her arms, and her expression softened. Oh my, what have we here? Grandma, this is Sarah and her daughter Emma. They're in need of a place to stay for the night, Jake said simply. Rose stepped aside without hesitation, gesturing them into the warm house. Well, don't just stand there letting the cold in. Come on, both of you. That baby needs to be somewhere warm. The inside of the house was even more welcoming than the outside. The living room was furnished with comfortable, well-worn furniture, and the walls were covered with family photographs spanning decades. The smell of fresh bread still lingered in the air, and Sarah felt her stomach grouch. He hadn't eaten since breakfast. Now then, Rose said, settling into a rocking chair and patting the sofa across from her. Sit yourself down, dear. You look like you're about to fall over. Sarah sank into the soft cushions, still holding Emma protectively. Ma'am, I need to be honest with you. I don't have money for a room. I can work, I'll clean or cook or whatever you need, but I can't pay up front. Rose waved her hand dismissively. Money talk can wait until morning. Right now, you both need food and rest. When's the last time you ate? This morning, Sarah admitted. And the baby? She's been fussy all day. I think she's hungry. But Sarah's voice trailed off, and she felt her cheeks burn with shame. Rose's expression grew understanding. You're nursing, and you're not eating enough to keep your milk supply up. I see the problem. She stood up with surprising agility for her age. Jake, you go on home. I'll take care of these two. Jake hesitated at the door. You sure, Grandma? I could help. I've been taking care of folks since before you were born, young man. We'll be just fine. Rose's voice was firm but loving. Besides, you've got cattle to tend to in the morning. After Jake left, Rose led Sarah to a sunny kitchen, where she immediately began bustling around. pulling ingredients from the refrigerator and pantry. I'm making you a proper meal, and then we're getting that baby fed. After that, you're both going to sleep in a real bed. Sarah watched in amazement as Rose prepared a plate of leftover roast chicken, mashed potatoes, and green beans, then warmed it in the microwave. I don't understand why you're being so kind to us. You don't even know us. Rose set the steaming plate in front of Sarah and poured her a large glass of milk. Honey, I've been running this boarding house for 30 years. In that time, I've seen all kinds of people come through that door. Some are running from something, some are running to something, and some are just plain lost. But they all need the same thing, a safe place to rest, and remember that they're not alone in this world. As Sarah ate, she felt strength returning to her body. Emma woke up and nursed successfully for the first time all day, apparently benefiting from her mother's improved nutrition. There's a room upstairs that's perfect for you too, Rose said, leading them up a staircase lined with more family photos. It's got a crib that my great-grandson used when he was small, and the window looks out over the mountains. Come morning, you'll see one of the most beautiful views in all of Montana. The room was indeed perfect, cozy and clean, with a double bed covered in a handmade quilt and a wooden crib positioned near the window. Sarah laid Emma down gently, and for the first time in hours, her daughter slept peacefully. Thank you, Sarah whispered, tears streaming down her face. I don't know what we would have done without you. Rose patted her shoulder gently. You would have figured something out, dear. Mothers always do. But now you don't have to figure it out alone. Sarah woke to the sound of Emma's soft babbling and sunlight streaming through the window. For a moment, she forgot where she was, but then the events of the previous night came flooding back. She sat up in the comfortable bed and looked out the window, gasping at the view that greeted her. The boarding house sat on a hillside overlooking a valley that seemed to stretch forever. Rolling pastures dotted with cattle extended to the base of snow-capped mountains that rose majestically into a crystal-clear blue sky. It was more beautiful than any postcard she'd ever seen. Good morning, sweetheart, she whispered to Emma, who was standing in the crib, gripping the rails and bouncing on her little legs. Look where we are. After changing Emma's diaper, grateful that Rose had somehow procured baby supplies during the night, Sarah made her way downstairs. The smell of coffee and bacon filled the air, and she could hear Rose humming in the kitchen. There you are, Rose said with a warm smile. I was wondering when you'd wake up. I hope you slept well. Better than I have in weeks, Sarah admitted. Rose, I need to ask you something. How did you get baby supplies? I didn't have any diapers left last night. Rose chuckled. Oh, I keep all sorts of things in this house. You'd be surprised what accumulates over 30 years. Besides, I called my neighbor Mrs. Patterson this morning. She's got a granddaughter about Emma's age. She brought over some extras. Sarah felt overwhelmed by the kindness. I don't know how to thank you. You can start by eating breakfast, Rose said, setting a plate of eggs, bacon, and toast in front of her. And then we're going to have a proper conversation about your situation. As Sarah ate, she found herself telling Rose everything about Marcus leaving, about losing her parents, about having no family or support system. Rose listened without judgment, occasionally asking gentle questions or making supportive comments. So you see, Sarah concluded, I don't really have anywhere to go. I thought maybe I could find work in a small town, start over somewhere new. Rose nodded thoughtfully. Well, Copper Ridge might be small, but it's got opportunities for someone willing to work hard. The question is, what kind of work are you looking for? I'll do anything, Sarah said quickly. I worked as a bookkeeper before Emma was born, but I can clean, cook, wait tables, whatever you need. Actually, Rose said, a thoughtful expression crossing her face, I might have a proposition for you. I'm not as young as I used to be, and running this boarding house is getting to be more than I can handle alone. I've been thinking about hiring someone to help with the cooking and cleaning, someone who could also help me with the bookkeeping. The pay wouldn't be much, but it would include room and board for you and Emma. Sarah's heart leaped. Are you serious? You'd really offer me a job? I'm always serious about business, Rose said with a smile. But I'd want you to think about it carefully. Copper Ridge isn't like the city. It's quiet, and everyone knows everyone else's business. Some folks might have opinions about a single mother starting over in their town. I don't care what people think, Sarah said firmly. Emma and I need stability, and this sounds like a dream come true. Rose nodded approvingly. Good, I like your attitude. Now, there's something else you should know. Jack, the young man who brought you here, he owns the ranch next door. He's been helping me with the heavier work around here, And he's a good man, but he's also single, and some folks in town might start getting ideas if they see him around here helping you. Sarah felt her cheeks warm. I'm not looking for a relationship. I just want to focus on taking care of Emma and getting back on my feet. I understand, dear, but life has a way of surprising us sometimes. Jake's a good man who's been hurt before, just like you. Sometimes good people find each other when they least expect it. Before Sarah could respond, there was a knock at the door. Rose smiled knowingly. That'll be Jake. He usually stops by around this time to check on things and have a cup of coffee. Sarah's heart skipped a beat as she heard Jake's voice greeting Rose. She quickly checked her appearance in the reflection of the window, then wondered why she cared. She wasn't looking for romancy, was looking for stability. But as Jake walked into the kitchen, removing his hat and smiling at her and Emma, Sarah felt something flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with gratitude and everything to do with the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled. Morning, Sarah. How did you and Emma sleep? He asked, his voice warm and genuine. Very well, thank you, she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. And thank you again for helping us last night. Jake waved off her thanks. Just glad I could help. Grandma Rose treating you well. She's offered me a job, Sarah said, still hardly believing it herself. Jake's smile widened. That's wonderful news. Copper Ridge could use someone like you. 3 weeks had passed since Sarah's arrival in Copper Ridge, and she was beginning to feel like she might actually belong somewhere again. The work at Rose's boarding house was demanding but rewarding. She cooked breakfast for the guests, kept the books, and helped with cleaning and maintenance. In return, she and Emma had a comfortable room, steady meals, and something she hadn't experienced in a long time. Security. Emma was thriving too. The mountain air seemed to agree with her, and she was sleeping better than she ever had. Rose had become like a grandmother to her, often babysitting while Sarah worked and spoiling her with attention and homemade toys. What Sarah hadn't expected was how quickly she'd become part of the community. Mrs. Patterson, the neighbor who had provided baby supplies, had become a friend and informal babysitter. Dr. Martinez, the town's only physician, had examined Emma at no charge and declared her perfectly healthy. Even the local grocery store owner, Mr. Thompson, had taken to setting aside the best produce for Sarah and refusing to let her pay full price. But it was Jake's presence that both comforted and confused her. He stopped by the boarding house every morning and evening, ostensibly to check on Rose and help with repairs, but Sarah noticed he always seemed to time his visits when she was around. He'd started bringing little gifts for Emma: wooden rattle he'd carved himself, a soft stuffed horse from the general store, picture books from the library. You don't have to do that, Sarah had protested when he presented Emma with a beautiful handmade high chair. I know I don't have to, Jake had replied, his eyes meeting hers. I want to. The problem was, Sarah was starting to want things too. She found herself looking forward to Jake's visits, to the way he made her laugh, to the gentle way he interacted with Emma. But every time she caught herself having these feelings, Marcus's voice echoed in her head. I never wanted to be a father. I'm done pretending. On this particular morning, Sarah was in the kitchen preparing breakfast for the boarding house's 3 current guests when Jake appeared at the back door, as had become his routine. Morning, Sarah, he said, hanging his hat on the hook by the door. Smells good in here. Thanks, she replied, not looking up from the pancakes she was flipping. Rose is still asleep, if you're looking for her. Actually, I was looking for you, Jake said, and something in his tone made Sarah glance up. Oh. Jake pulled out a chair and sat down at the kitchen table. I wanted to talk to you about something. There's a harvest festival coming up next weekend, the biggest event of the year in Copper Ridge. Everyone goes, and I was wondering if you'd like to come with me. Sarah's heart started beating faster, like ... like a date. If you want it to be, Jake said quietly. Or just as friends. I know you've been through a lot, and I don't want to pressure you. But I'd like to spend more time with you, Sarah. Not just these quick conversations in the morning and evening. Sarah turned back to the stove, her hands trembling slightly as she transferred the pancakes to a plate. Jake, you're a wonderful man, but I don't think I'm ready for whatever this is. Can I ask why? Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Because I have Emma to think about. Because I can't afford to make another mistake. Because ... She trailed off, unable to voice her deepest fear. Because you're scared, Jake said gently. Sarah nodded, still not facing him. Emma's father walked away when things got real. He said he never wanted to be a father, that he was done pretending. I can't risk putting Emma through that again. Jake was quiet for so long that Sarah finally turned around to look at him. His expression was serious, thoughtful. "Sarah, I can't make you any promises about the future. Nobody can. But I can tell you this, not Marcus. I'm not pretending about anything. I care about you, and I care about Emma. If you're not ready for a relationship, I respect that. But don't let fear make the decision for you." Before Sarah could respond, Emma's voice could be heard over the baby monitor, babbling and calling for her mother. Sarah hurried upstairs to get her, grateful for the interruption. When she came back down with Emma on her hip, Jake was still sitting at the kitchen table, but he was smiling. "There's my girl," he said, standing up and reaching for Emma, who immediately stretched her arms toward him. "How's my little princess this morning?" Sarah watched as Jake bounced Emma gently, making funny faces that had her giggling. The sight of them together made her heart ache with longing and fear in equal measure. "I need to serve breakfast," she said, taking Emma back from Jake. "I'll help," Jake offered, as he did every morning. As they worked together, moving around the kitchen in a comfortable rhythm that had developed over the weeks, Sarah found herself imagining what it would be like if this was their life, not just helping each other out, but actually building something together. But then she remembered the look on Marcus's face when he'd told her he was leaving, and she pushed the thoughts away. She couldn't afford to dream about things that might not last. After breakfast, Jake prepared to leave for his ranch work, but he paused at the door. "The festival offer stands," he said. "No pressure, but I'll be there either way. If you change your mind, you know where to find me." The week leading up to the Harvest Festival passed in a blur of activity. Rose had explained that the festival was Copper Ridge's biggest social event, bringing together not just locals but visitors from surrounding towns. The boarding house would be full, and Sarah found herself working harder than ever to prepare for the influx of guests. "Every room is booked," Rose announced over breakfast on Wednesday morning. "We haven't had this much business in years. Word is getting out about your cooking, dear." Sarah felt a flush of pride. She'd been experimenting with recipes, using the fresh ingredients available in the mountain town to create hearty, satisfying meals that guests raved about. Several had specifically requested her recipes, and a few had even asked if she did catering. "I love cooking," Sarah admitted. "I never really had the chance to do much of it before Emma was born." "Well, you certainly have a gift for it," Rose said. "In fact, I've been thinking, what would you say to expanding our breakfast service? Maybe offering dinner to guests as well?" Sarah's eyes widened. "You'd want to do that." "I'd want you to do that," Rose corrected. "This is your vision, dear. I'm just providing the venue." The conversation was interrupted by Jake's arrival, as usual, but today, instead of his typical work clothes, he was wearing clean jeans and a button-down shirt. "Don't you look nice?" Rose commented, with a knowing smile. "I'm heading into town to help set up for the festival," Jake explained, but his eyes were on Sarah. "The committee could use extra hands if you're interested." Sarah was tempted, but Emma was having a fussy morning and she still had lunch preparation to finish. "I don't think I can today." "I'll watch Emma," Rose offered immediately. "You've been working non-stop. A few hours in town would do you good." Before Sarah could protest, Rose had taken Emma from her arms and was making silly faces at the baby, who immediately began giggling. "I don't know, ... double quotes." Sarah began. "Come on," Jake said gently. "It'll be fun, and it'll give you a chance to see what the festival is like before you decide whether to attend." An hour later, Sarah found herself walking down Copper Ridge's main street, which was bustling with activity. Volunteers were hanging banners, setting up booths, and arranging tables. The normally quiet town was alive with energy and excitement. Sarah called out Mrs. Patterson, waving from a booth where she was arranging quilts. "Come see what we've got this year." Sarah spent the next few hours being introduced to people, helping where she could, and getting a feel for the community that had welcomed her. Everyone she met was friendly and genuinely interested in her story, though they were tactful enough not to pry too deeply. "You're fitting in well," Jake observed as they took a break, sitting on a bench outside the general store and sharing a bottle of water. "It's strange," Sarah admitted. "I never lived in a small town before. I always thought it would feel claustrophobic, but it's actually comforting to know people care about what happens to you. That's the best part of small town life." Jake agreed, of course. "It's also the worst part, when you want privacy." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the activity around them. Sarah found herself stealing glances at Jake, noticing details she'd been too nervous to observe before: the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the careful way he handled everything, the respect everyone in town showed him. "Jake," she said, suddenly, "can I ask you something? Anything? Why haven't you ever married? I mean, you're clearly well liked in town. You're successful." She trailed off, realizing how personal the question was. Jake was quiet for a moment. "I was engaged once, about 5 years ago. Her name was Jennifer, and she was from back east. She came here to teach school, and we fell in love fast. Maybe too fast." Sarah waited, sensing there was more to the story. When it came time to actually get married, she realized she couldn't handle small-town life permanently. She wanted to move to Denver, start over somewhere with more opportunities. I offered to go with her, but she said she'd rather make a clean break. "I'm sorry," Sarah said softly. "It was for the best," Jake said. "I realized afterward that we wanted different things. She wanted to change me, and I wanted to change her. That's not love, that's just projection." Sarah felt something shift in her chest. "Is that why you've been so patient with me? Because you understand what it's like to be hurt?" Jake turned to look at her directly. "I've been patient with you because I care about you, Sarah. Not because I want to fix you or change you, but because I like exactly who you are. You're strong, you're kind, you're an amazing mother, and you make me want to be better than I am." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. "Jake, double quotes, I know you're scared," he continued. "I know you've been hurt badly. But I also know that you're braver than you think you are. You got on a bus to a town you'd never heard of, with nothing but a baby and hope. That takes courage." "It wasn't courage," Sarah said. "It was desperation." "Sometimes courage and desperation look the same from the outside," Jake said with a small smile. "The point is, you didn't give up. You kept going, kept fighting for Emma, kept believing that things could get better." They were interrupted by Dr. Martinez calling Jake's name. There was some issue with the medical station setup that needed his attention. As Jake stood to leave, he turned back to Sarah. "I meant what I said about the festival. I'd love to take you, but I'll understand if you're not ready. Either way, I'm not going anywhere, Sarah. I'm not Marcus, and I'm not Jennifer. I'm just a man who cares about you and Emma." As Sarah watched him walk away, she felt the walls she'd built around her heart beginning to crack. Maybe, just maybe, it was time to be brave again. Friday evening arrived with a crisp autumn air that carried the scent of wood smoke and the distant sound of bluegrass music drifting from the festival grounds. Sarah stood in front of the mirror in her room, second-guessing her decision for the 100th time that day. She'd finally worked up the courage to tell Jake she'd go to the festival with him, and now she was terrified. Emma sat in her high chair, the one Jake had made, happily, gumming a teething biscuit and watching her mother pace back and forth. "What do you think, baby girl?" Sarah asked, smoothing down the blue dress she'd bought from the general store, the first new dress she'd purchased in over a year. "Is Mummy crazy for doing this?" Emma gurgled happily, which Sarah chose to interpret as approval. A knock at the door interrupted her nervous energy. Rose's voice called out, "Sarah, dear, Jake's here." Sarah took a deep breath, picked up Emma, and made her way downstairs. Jake was waiting in the living room, wearing dark jeans, a white button-down shirt, and a sports jacket that made him look more handsome than should be legal. When he saw her, his face lit up with genuine admiration. "You look beautiful," he said simply, and Sarah felt her cheeks warm. "Thank you," she replied, suddenly shy. "You clean up pretty well yourself." Rose appeared with a diaper bag and Emma's stroller. "I've packed everything you might need," she said, handing the bag to Jake. "And don't you dare come back early on my account. I've got a good book and a quiet house for the first time in weeks." The festival was even more magical than Sarah had expected. The main street had been transformed into a wonderland of twinkling lights, colorful booths, and the kind of community spirit she'd only read about in books. The air was filled with the sounds of live music, laughter, and the sizzle of food cooking on outdoor grills. "Where should we start?" Jake asked, taking the stroller from Sarah and pushing it with one hand while offering her his other arm. "I don't know," Sarah admitted. "I've never been to anything like this." "Well then, we'll have to make sure you get the full experience," Jake said with a grin. "Food first, then dancing, then more food." They started at the barbecue stand, where Jake was greeted by what seemed like half the town. Sarah was introduced as Jake's friend Sarah, and she noticed the curious but friendly look she received. Emma was an instant hit, charming everyone with her smiles and babbling. "She's going to be a heartbreaker," commented Mrs. Thompson, grocery store owner's wife, tickling Emma's chin, just like her mama. As they walked through the festival, Sarah found herself relaxing for the first time in months. Jake was the perfect escort, attentive, without being overbearing, funny without trying too hard, and naturally good with Emma. When the baby got fussy, he distracted her with silly faces. When Sarah wanted to look at something, he waited patiently, without making her feel rushed. "I have a confession," Sarah said as they shared a funnel cake at a picnic table. "I was terrified to come tonight." "Why?" Jake asked, though his tone suggested he already knew. "Because I haven't felt this happy in a long time, and I'm scared of what happens when it ends." Jake set down his fork and looked at her seriously. "Sarah, I need to ask you something, and I want you to answer honestly. Do you think I'm the kind of man who would walk away from someone I care about?" Sarah considered the question carefully. In the weeks she'd known Jake, he'd been nothing but reliable. He showed up when he said he would, he followed through on his promises, and he treated everyone with respect and kindness. "No," she admitted. "I don't think you would." "Then why are you assuming I will?" Sarah was quiet for a moment, watching Emma play with a toy horse Jake had bought her at one of the booths. "Because I'm scared of being wrong again. Because if I let myself believe this is real and then it isn't, I don't think I could handle it." Jake reached across the table and took her hand. "I can't promise you that everything will be perfect, Sarah. I can't promise we won't have disagreements or challenges, but I can promise you that I won't walk away when things get difficult. I can promise you that I care about both you and Emma, and that I want to be part of your lives if you'll let me." Before Sarah could respond, the sound of a fiddle filled the air, and couples began making their way to the area that had been set up for dancing. Jake stood and extended his hand to her. "Dance with me," he said. "I don't know how to dance to this kind of music," Sarah protested. "Then I'll teach you," Jake said. "It's not about being perfect, it's about being together." Sarah looked at Emma, who was contentedly playing in her stroller, then at Jake's outstretched hand. Taking a deep breath, she placed her hand in his, and allowed him to lead her to the dance floor. The music was slow and sweet, a waltz that seemed to float on the mountain air. Jake's arms came around her naturally, and Sarah found herself following his lead without thinking. They moved together as if they'd been dancing for years. And Sarah realized this was what she'd been missing, not just romance, but partnership, the feeling of being truly seen and cherished. "See," Jake murmured against her ear. "You're a natural." Sarah looked up at him, seeing her own feelings reflected in his eyes. "Jake, I know," he said softly. "I feel it too." As the song ended, Sarah made a decision that would change everything. Instead of stepping away, she rose on her tiptoes and kissed him. It was gentle, tentative, but full of promise. When they broke apart, Jake's eyes were shining. "Does this mean what I think it means?" he asked. Sarah nodded, her heart racing. "I'm tired of being afraid. I'm ready to try." The rest of the evening passed in a blur of laughter, music, and growing intimacy. Jake won Emma a stuffed bear at the ring toss. Sarah tried her first bite of elk jerky. "Not bad," she admitted, and they watched the fireworks finale with Emma, asleep in Jake's arms, as they walked back to the boarding house, under a canopy of stars. Sarah felt something she hadn't experienced in over a year: complete contentment. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was living. "Thank you," she said, as they reached the front porch. "For what?" "For seeing me," Sarah said simply. "For seeing us. For being patient while I figured out how to be brave." Jake shifted Emma gently in his arms and leaned down to kiss Sarah's forehead. "Thank you for taking the chance." Winter came early to Copper Ridge that year, blanketing the mountains in snow and turning the boarding house into a cozy retreat from the cold. Sarah had never experienced a mountain winter before, and she found herself enchanted by the way the snow transformed the landscape into something magical. Her relationship with Jake had developed slowly but steadily over the past 2 months. They'd established a routine that worked for both of them. Jake would come for breakfast most mornings, helping Sarah with the guests, and playing with Emma while she cooked. Evenings were often spent by the fireplace in Rose's living room, talking about everything and nothing while Emma played on a blanket at their feet. "I have news," Rose announced one snowy December morning as Sarah was preparing breakfast for their winter guest, a family of skiers and an elderly couple who came to Copper Ridge every year for the quiet holidays. "Good news or bad news?" Sarah asked, not looking up from the pancakes she was flipping. "Good news, I think," Rose said with a mysterious smile. "Mrs. Henderson from the church committee called. Apparently, word has gotten out about your cooking, and they want to know if you'd be interested in catering the Christmas Eve service reception." Sarah paused, spatula in hand. "Really? That's a big event, isn't it?" "The biggest social event of the winter," Rose confirmed. "Nearly everyone in town attends, plus visitors." It would be quite an undertaking. I don't know if I'm ready for something that large, Sarah said uncertainly. I think you are, came Jake's voice from the doorway. He stamped the snow off his boots and hung up his coat, then crossed to where Emma was sitting in her high chair and kissed the top of her head. Morning, princess. Emma squealed with delight and reached for him, which had become their morning ritual. Jake had become such a natural part of their routine that Sarah sometimes forgot he hadn't always been there. You really think I could handle catering for the whole town? Sarah asked. I think you could handle anything you set your mind to, Jake said, settling Emma on his hip. Besides, you wouldn't be doing it alone. Half the town would volunteer to help if you asked. Over the next few days, Sarah found herself seriously considering the opportunity. She'd been toying with the idea of expanding her cooking into a real business, but she'd been too nervous to take the leap. This could be the perfect way to test the waters. I'll do it, she announced over dinner one evening, surprising herself with her own decisiveness. Jake grinned. That's my girl. You're going to be amazing. The next month passed in a whirlwind of planning and preparation. Sarah threw herself into menu planning, testing recipes, and organizing volunteers. She discovered she had a natural talent for project management, coordinating everything from ingredient sourcing to serving schedules. Jake was her constant support, helping with everything from babysitting Emma during planning meetings to taste testing new dishes. He never once complained about the long hours or the stress, and he seemed genuinely excited about Sarah's growing confidence. You're different, he observed one evening as they sat by the fire, Emma asleep in Sarah's arms. More yourself, if that makes sense. Sarah considered this. I think I'm finally remembering who I am. For so long, I was just trying to survive, to be what other people needed me to be. But now, I feel like I'm actually living my own life. I love watching you come into your own, Jake said softly. You're incredible, Sarah. I hope you know that. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. I love you, Jake, she said, the words coming out before she could stop them. Jake's face lit up with joy. I love you too, Sarah. I love you and Emma both. It was the first time either of them had said the words, but somehow they felt like a natural progression of everything they'd been building together. The Christmas Eve reception was a resounding success. Sarah's menu of traditional holiday dishes, with her own special touches, was a hit, and she found herself fielding requests for catering services from guests who wanted to book her for their own events. I think you might have accidentally started a business, Rose commented as they cleaned up after the last guest had left. I think I might have, Sarah agreed, feeling proud and slightly overwhelmed as they walked home through the softly falling snow. Jake carrying a sleeping Emma, Sarah reflected on how much her life had changed in just a few months. She'd gone from desperate and hopeless to confident and loved. She had a home, a family, and a future she was excited about. Penny for your thoughts, Jake said as they reached the boarding house. Just thinking about how different everything is now, Sarah said. 6 months ago, I was sitting on a bench in the middle of nowhere, with no idea what I was going to do. Now I feel like I could take on the world. Jake stopped walking and turned to face her. Sarah, I want to ask you something, and I want you to know, there's no pressure. You can take as much time as you need to think about it. Sarah's heart started beating faster. Okay. Jake reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. I know we haven't been together very long, but I also know that what we have is real. I want to spend the rest of my life with you and Emma. I want to be the family we've already started becoming. Sarah stared at the box, her mind racing. Jake, I'm not asking you to answer right now, he said quickly. I just want you to know that I'm serious about this, about us. When you're ready, if you're ready, I'll be here. Sarah took the box with trembling hands. Can I ask you something? Anything? Are you sure you want to take on a ready-made family? Emma's not your biological daughter. That's a big responsibility. Jake's expression grew serious. Sarah, I've been thinking about this for months. Emma may not be my biological daughter, but she's already my daughter in every way that matters. I love her like she's my own. If you'll have me, I want to adopt her legally. I want to be her dad. Sarah felt tears streaming down her face. Yes, she whispered. Yes, you'll think about it. Yes, I'll marry you, Sarah said, laughing through her tears. Yes, to all of it. The engagement ring was simple, but perfect. A solitaire diamond, set in white gold, that caught the light like captured starlight. Sarah had been wearing it for 2 weeks, but she still found herself staring at it in wonder during quiet moments. She was engaged. She was going to marry Jake Morrison. the cowboy who had saved her and Emma from a life of uncertainty. The news had spread through Copper Ridge like wildfire, as news tended to do in small towns. Sarah had been surprised by the overwhelmingly positive response from the community. She'd worried that some people might have opinions about her past or the speed of their relationship. But instead, she'd received congratulations, offers to help with wedding planning, and more catering inquiries than she could handle. "I think you're going to need to make this official," Rose said one morning, gesturing to a stack of messages from potential clients. "You've got enough business to keep you busy for months." Sarah looked at the papers, feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness. "I never thought I'd be running my own business." "Life has a way of surprising us," Rose said with a knowing smile. "The question is, what are you going to call it?" Sarah had been thinking about this for weeks. She wanted something that reflected both her new life and her hopes for the future. "What do you think about Mountain Haven Catering?" "Perfect," Rose said approvingly. "It sounds like home." Home. The word still felt miraculous to Sarah. She'd spent so much of her life feeling displaced. But Copper Ridge had become more than just a place to live, had become her sanctuary. Jake arrived for his usual morning visit. But today, he had Emma's stroller with him. "I thought maybe you'd like to take a walk," he said. "It's beautiful out there, and I have something I want to show you." Sarah bundled Emma into her winter coat and followed Jake outside. The morning was crisp and clear, with fresh snow sparkling on the ground and the mountains standing majestically against a brilliant blue sky. "Where are we going?" Sarah asked as they walked down a path she'd never taken before. "You'll see," Jake said mysteriously. They walked for about 15 minutes before Jake stopped in front of a small log cabin nestled in a grove of pine trees. It was charming, but clearly needed work. The porch sagged slightly, and several shutters hung at odd angles. "What is this place?" Sarah asked. "It's mine," Jake said. "I bought it about 5 years ago, thinking I'd fix it up as a rental property, but I never got around to it." He paused, looking nervous. "I was hoping maybe we could fix it up together as our home." Sarah stared at the cabin, her mind racing. "You want us to live here?" "I want us to build our life here," Jake corrected. "I know it needs work, but I thought maybe we could make it into something special, something that's ours." Sarah pushed the stroller closer to the cabin, studying its potential. She could see past the needed repairs to the charm underneath. The setting was perfect, private, but not isolated, with a view of the mountains and plenty of space for Emma to play. "It's beautiful," she said finally. "But Jake, I don't know the first thing about renovating a house." "That's okay," Jake said, his confidence returning. "I do. And Rose knows everyone in town who could help with what I can't do myself. We'd take our time, do it right." Sarah tried to imagine living here with Jake and Emma, creating new memories. In every room, the thought filled her with warmth and excitement. "There's something else," Jake said, pulling a folded paper from his pocket. "I've been thinking about what you said about Emma, about wanting to adopt her. I talked to a lawyer in Billings, and he said the process is straightforward, since her biological father has no legal rights." Sarah's heart clenched. "Marcus signed away his parental rights." "He did," Jake said gently. "The lawyer said it would make the adoption much simpler. If you're still okay with it, I could officially become Emma's father." Sarah looked at Emma, who was babbling happily in her stroller, reaching for the snowflakes that were starting to fall. The little girl had never known Marcus as a father figure. Jake was the only dad she'd ever really had. "She already calls you Dada," Sarah said softly. Jake's eyes lit up. "She does. Haven't you noticed? She's been doing it for weeks." Sarah smiled at the wonder on Jake's face. "I think she made the decision for us." As if summoned by their conversation, Emma began making her favorite sound, "Dada, Dada." Jake's eyes filled with tears as he reached down to pick up Emma. "Hey there, princess. Did you hear that, Sarah? She's calling me Dad." Sarah watched Jake hold Emma, saw the love and devotion in his eyes, and felt her heart expand with gratitude. This was what family was supposed to feel like, not obligation or duty, but choice and love and commitment. "Yes," she said. "Yes to what?" "Yes to all of it. The cabin, the adoption, the life we're building together. I want it all, Jake." Jake spun around with Emma in his arms, both of them laughing. "We're going to be a family," he said to Emma. "A real family." As they walked back toward the boarding house, Sarah felt a sense of completion she'd never experienced before. She was no longer running from her past or just surviving her present. She was building a future, and it was more beautiful than anything she'd ever dared to imagine. "When do you want to get married?" Jake asked, as they reached the boarding house. Sarah thought about this. Spring, she said. I want to get married when everything is coming back to life. Spring it is, Jake agreed. But Sarah, yes, I want you to know that I'm not waiting until spring to consider us a family. As far as I'm concerned, we already are one. Sarah stood on her tiptoes to kiss him, Emma giggling between them. I love you, Jake Morrison. I love you too, Sarah Morrison, he said, trying out her new name, Sarah Morrison. She liked the sound of that. The wedding was everything Sarah had never dared to dream of. Rose's backyard had been transformed into a mountain paradise, with white chairs arranged in rows facing an arch made of pine boughs and wildflowers. The late April air was warm and sweet, carrying the scent of apple blossoms and the sound of a creek bubbling nearby. Sarah stood in Rose's bedroom, looking at herself in the full-length mirror. Her wedding dress was simple but elegant, flowing ivory gown that Rose had helped her choose during a shopping trip to Billings. Emma, now walking and chattering constantly, was dressed in a tiny white dress with a flower crown that she kept trying to pull off. You look absolutely radiant, Rose said, adjusting Sarah's veil. I've never seen you look so happy. Sarah smiled, feeling tears threaten to spill over. I never thought I'd have this, Rose. A year ago, I was sitting on a bench in the middle of the night with no hope. Now, look at me. You always had the hope, dear, Rose said gently. You just needed to remember how to see it. There was a gentle knock at the door, and Dr. Martinez's wife, Maria, peeked in. It's time, she said with a warm smile. Sarah took a deep breath, picked up Emma, and walked downstairs to where her new life was waiting. The ceremony was small but perfect. Jake stood at the altar in a black suit, his eyes never leaving Sarah's face as she walked down the aisle. Emma rode on Sarah's hip, babbling happily and waving at the assembled guests. The entire town seemed to be there, their faces filled with genuine joy for the couple who had found love against all odds. Pastor Williams, who had married 3 generations of Morrison men, smiled as Sarah and Jake took their places before him. We are gathered here today, he began, to witness the union of Jake Morrison and Sarah Coleman, and to celebrate the family they have already begun to build together. The ceremony was traditional but personal. Jake and Sarah had written their own vows, and when it came time to speak them, both were fighting back tears. Sarah, Jake began, his voice strong and clear, a year ago. You came into my life carrying nothing but hope and the most precious gift I've ever received, Emma. You taught me that love isn't about perfection or timing. It's about choosing to build something beautiful together, even when the foundation isn't perfect. I promise to be your partner, your support, and your safe harbor. I promise to love Emma as my own daughter, and to give both of you the kind of love that never gives up. Sarah's hands trembled as she spoke her vows. Jake, you saved me when I didn't even know I needed saving. You saw me at my lowest point, and chose to love me anyway. You showed me that home isn't a place, it's the people who choose to stay with you through everything. I promise to be your partner in building our dreams, your comfort in difficult times, and your biggest supporter in all you do. I promise to love you with the same faithfulness you've shown me. When Pastor Williams pronounced them husband and wife, the kiss they shared was witnessed by the entire community that had embraced them. Emma, still in Sarah's arms, clapped her hands and shouted "Dada," which made everyone laugh. Ladies and gentlemen, Pastor Williams announced, I present to you Mr. and Mrs. Jake Morrison and their daughter Emma. The reception was held in the same backyard, with tables laden with food that Sarah had prepared with help from half the town. The evening was filled with laughter, dancing, and the kind of genuine celebration that only happens when a community comes together to support 2 people they truly care about. As the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Jake and Sarah found themselves alone for a moment, watching Emma play with the other children on the grass. Mrs. Morrison, Jake said, wrapping his arms around his wife from behind. How does it feel? Perfect, Sarah said, leaning back against him. Absolutely perfect. I have something for you, Jake said, reaching into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a set of keys. Our house is ready. Sarah turned in his arms, eyes wide. Really? Really? I finished the last of the painting yesterday. It's ready for the Morrison family to move in. Sarah looked at the keys, then at Emma, then at Jake. We're really doing this. We're really a family. We've been a family for months, sweetheart. Now we just have the paperwork to prove it. As if summoned by their conversation, Emma over to them, her flower crown askew, and her dress grass-stained. Mama! "Dada!" she called, reaching up to be held. Jake scooped her up, and Sarah wrapped her arms around both of them. "That's right, princess," Jake said. "Mama and Dada forever and always." 3 months later, the adoption papers were finalized. Emma officially became Emma Morrison, and Jake officially became her father. The ceremony at the courthouse was simple, but the celebration afterward rivaled their wedding. Sarah's catering business had grown beyond her wildest dreams. She'd hired 2 assistants and was booking events as far away as Billings. The cabin had become a warm, welcoming home filled with laughter and love. On their first anniversary, as they sat on their porch watching Emma play in the yard, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought them here. "Do you ever think about how different things might have been if you hadn't found us that night?" she asked Jake. Jake considered this. "Sometimes, but then I think about how everything had to happen exactly the way it did for us to find each other. Your struggles, my heartbreak, even the timing, it all led to this moment." Sarah nodded, understanding. "I used to think I was broken, that my life was ruined. But I wasn't broken. I was just being prepared for something better." "We both were," Jake agreed, "and now we get to spend the rest of our lives being grateful for the path that brought us together." Emma came running up to the porch, her arms full of wildflowers. "Mama, Dada flowers." Sarah took the flowers and pulled Emma onto her lap. "They're beautiful, sweetheart, just like our life." As the sun set over the mountains, painting their world in golden light, Sarah felt the deep satisfaction of a life well lived. She had found her home, her family, and her purpose. She had learned that sometimes the best things in life come disguised as the worst things, and that hope, once lost, can be found again in the most unexpected places. She was no longer the woman who had been left with a baby and no hope. She was Sarah Morrison, wife, mother, businesswoman, and beloved member of a community that had embraced her completely. She was exactly where she belonged, with exactly the people she was meant to love. And in the growing darkness, with her husband's arm around her and her daughter safe in her lap, Sarah Morrison smiled and knew that sometimes fairy tales do come true, especially for those brave enough to believe in second chances. Sometimes the greatest love stories begin with the greatest heartbreak. Sometimes the people who save us are the ones who need saving too. And sometimes, when we're brave enough to say yes to love, we discover that hope was never really lost. It was just waiting for the right moment to bloom again.